Welcome everyone, Christine here with a discussion about the Greenskins in Total War Warhammer 3 Immortal Empire's community tier list for the Legendary Lords and their campaigns of the Greenskins. Now, the poll that I've done has over 1k votes, and there are two clear winners according to that poll, but the other three, well, it's fairly close together, so margin of error could change over the next couple of days, but usually when polls get to like over 1k votes, typically speaking, the results don't change that much. So I'm going based on that. And in last position, we have Warzag, the Great Green Prophet. He was a free campaign for the Greenskins released in Warhammer 1, and he certainly feels dated as a result of it. His faction effects just give you a chance to contain Savage Orcs in your WAS. Yeah, that's great. Compared to, say, Black Orcs or other wonderful things, you get Savage Orcs. Alright, 25 charge bonus for Savage Orc units. Okay. Certainly pretty solid, but really the things that should be faction effects for Warzag but are not are part of his skill line, like melee attack and charge bonus for Savage Orcs, charge bonus for Savage Orc Cavalry, melee attack for that Cavalry, magical attacks, strips enemies of magic resistance they may have, enemy armies in region, and quite importantly, physical resistance for his entire army, as well as physical resistance for trolls, giant Arachnara spiders, and rogue idols. Used to be when Warhammer 3 Immortal Empires came out, you could get the rogue idol rendering out very quickly, but that's no longer the case. But really, his Lord effects, if we had like even half of that, or even a quarter of that as a faction effect, Warzag would be certainly a lot better. Like, imagine having 10% upkeep benefits for Savage Orcs faction-wide, recruitment cost, 5% or even 10% physical resistance for Savage Orcs. Yeah, that would be great, but it's just a Lord effect. It's not even a special skill line, it's just literally a Lord effect. And it's not particularly exciting. I mean, he is a really powerful caster, but as I have stated in quite a lot of videos, generally from my perspective, and apparently the community's perspective, caster lords are not necessarily the best to actually have leading armies, especially when you're playing a race that has a bunch of casters that you can get, which is certainly the case for the Greenskins. Also, even the case with the Squiggly Beast item that Warzag can get, because it gives them hero capacity for shamans and hero recruit rank. So while Warzag is a better caster, or he can cast 3 per spells, it's actually not necessarily worth it. Like, a melee lord is great because you can use him to duel other enemy lords. And for Greenskins, unless you're playing Grimgore, getting duelists can take some time because you do require tier 3 over here to get a Black Orc Big Boss. But yeah, I think for Warzag, he's just not really an exciting campaign, and the community agrees on that. I would not necessarily have put him last, but certainly not a great campaign. Number 4, it is Azag the Slaughter, one of the 2 original Greenskin Legendary Lords, who I personally think is actually much higher on this list. In fact, I personally rank him as the second best campaign. But people voted for him as the 4th campaign, so in second worst, really. And let me explain why I like Azag, what are the benefits in this campaign, and let me also explain why people probably voted him down. So Azag does have a really good climate situation. He has wasteland, he has mountain, he has temperate, he has savanna. So basically he can take a lot of territory over here from the Empire to the Dwarven lands, to the Badlands, to the Darklands, to the mountains and more, and even very sizable chunks of Cathay. In fact, most of Cathay is available to him, with the exception of the desert over there, the Warpstone Desert. That is a significant benefit, and because of Greenskin Confederation mechanics, he can just, like Grimgore, do his thing, become a powerhouse, and just seek his army, and then beat the crap out of it, and confederate Grimgore. Furthermore, he has a diplomatic relations benefit with Vampire Counts and Arcana Black, so he can make a really powerful alliance with Vlad. And funnily enough, Katrin doesn't hate him all that much like the Empire does, but not Katrin. So you end up fighting dwarves. Furthermore, he has a hero capacity for shamans through his special skill line over here, and he is a combination of a melee character, a really good melee character, not on the level of Grimgore, but very few people are on the level of Grimgore, but still a pretty powerful character. He doesn't have the Black Orc benefits, but he does have the Big Guns benefit. So he's really about the Big Guns in his army, and he has regeneration and Winds of Death bound spell. Now, I'm not particularly keen on his Lore of Death over there, and I think like with these kind of hybrid characters, it's really an exception rather than the rule that you want to focus on the magical skill tree as opposed to the melee skill tree. Drazov is kind of the exception there, but you only go for like certain spells, like the Flames of Asgore for that, even so. With Azak, he's kind of like the Greenskin version of Drazov. He's really powerful in melee. He has a flying monster, so he's really good from that perspective at rank 14. He's probably stronger in melee than Drazov, but a weaker caster overall. But he still is a caster with some pretty nasty stuff available in his campaign. Now, on top of this, he also gets the Winds of Nagash spell, Azak's hard armor. He gets a bunch of durability in combat through those items. And he gets research rate, which actually does count for the Greenskins. Unlike Cast Dwarves and Astrogoth, he actually has a better research rate than Astrogoth, which is freaking hilarious. But for Greenskins, where you do have a bunch of techs that do take a good amount of time, getting that extra research does count for a bit. Furthermore, Greenskins are a race that relies on looting and sacking settlements to feed their economy. So Azak having a faction-wide 25% income benefit in terms of sacking settlements is insane. You can get tens of thousands of gold in general as Greenskins, and Azak will get a quarter more. That is pretty bloody ridiculous when you're looking at it. He also gets an aspect of Dread Knight and Spirit Leech as abilities by default, so yeah, you got some pretty nasty stuff that you can use over here as Azak. Why wasn't he voted higher? Well, my suspicion on this is like out of the original Greenskin Legendary Lords, Grimgor is Grimgor at the end of the day, and Grom is just more of an interesting character for people. Like, I personally didn't really play this campaign that much until like really Warhammer 3. I mean, I did play a bit of Warhammer 2, but nowhere near as much as I played it in Warhammer 3. He really benefits compared to Warhammer 2 based on the Greenskin changes and diplomacy changes that were brought in Warhammer 3. In third position, it is Skarsnik. For me personally, this is kind of like the worst campaign of the Greenskins, because you have limitations on recruiting orcs in this campaign with unless you get Caracade Peaks. Now, the argument people will make, well, you have a 40% upkeep and recruitment benefit for goblins. Okay, I understand that, and so you're going to save a lot of money in the long term through these goblins, but here's the thing, you can get a lot of money through Azak anyway, you can get a lot of money in every Greenskin campaign. Having more armies than everyone else when you can maintain 4 full freaking stacks in like 15 turns as Grimgor, who doesn't have that, is kind of redundant from my perspective, and you do have unit limitations. The chief benefit, really, I would argue, in Skarsnik's campaign is that 100% character experience gain that he does have over here. And yes, he does have a unique structure over here, but honestly, it's just kind of... Although, it has to be said that 20 leadership at tier 5 for goblins and not goblins is certainly nice enough, as well as, you know, the unit experience that you do get faction-wide. So it's not something to sneeze at, but I don't know, like, just... I don't think it's necessarily all that special. And really, Skarsnik is not only a bad lord. Personally, he's a really bad lord. Because, like, faction effects aside, which, yeah, you know, I can understand them, they are powerful, Goblin Shamans Goblin Raid Shamans have the Goblin Tide skill. Skarsnik, if we look at him, he doesn't have that. So his goblins, while cheaper, they're not even as powerful as a generic goblin lord leading them. He does have a bunch of benefits in combat, to be sure about it, but he's a character focused on ambushing, and he doesn't have the stock stance. If he had the stock stance, that would be much, much more powerful. You can lightning strike, sure, that's nice, and you have a bunch of benefits for ambushing, but Greenskins are the kind of race who don't give a crap about ambushing because they're so damn powerful. Still, it does work. Here's the laughable aspect, the underbosses benefit. This is ridiculous, and it's actually bad, like genuinely bad. First off, Goblin Big Bosses, they have limited capacity slots, so it's whatever. And if you have Tamarkan Strait, okay, you can get that. You can get more of these, but who cares when you can recruit them anyway? through a tier 2 settlement. So it's like, okay, you might need, so if we look at Goblin Big Bosses, that's, actually it's tier 3, sorry. So you do need, wait, did they change that? I don't know. Could have been. I thought it was tier 4. Am I wrong? Do I misremember on this? Did they change that? Did I misremember? What the hell do I know? Or maybe it's just Skarsnik exclusive. Regardless, it doesn't matter. Like, actually, it doesn't matter. Like, you either get Hammercon straight, or you just recruit them for a tier 2 settlement, if you have that, and increase capacity in tier 3. Whatever on that. Night Goblin Shamans, not freaking worth it. Like, when it comes to Shamans of the Greenskins, you want to get Orc Shamans. They're much, much better. You're still going to have some hero limitations. Maybe a couple of them in support, so yeah, this skill is useless, but it's actually harmful in your campaign, because here's the thing about the Warhammer 3 meta as opposed to Warhammer 1 and 2. In Warhammer 1, when he was introduced, it made sense, because you actually wanted to improve the experience of your Legendary Lord by as much as possible, so this skill was a benefit. It is not a benefit, and it is actually a significant downside, because in Warhammer 3, you want your secondary, tertiary armies, etc., to get as much experience as possible. So genuinely don't get this skill. It's actually a waste of a skill point. Like everything else, you don't even need to get this particular skill. So that's how Skarsnik is. He's so bad that if I confederate him, yeah, I care about the territory, but I certainly don't want to use Skarsnik as a Legendary Lord. He's not that great in combat, and a Goblin Great Shaman. Like an Orc War Boss, right? Let's consider this. An Orc War Boss is pretty good at combat, right? And he has a flying mount. Skarsnik, he's on freaking foot. That's kind of, if he was mounted on his lovely squig there, maybe it would be different. But even a Goblin Great Shaman has a freaking Ragnarok, and he's a caster, and he has Goblin Tide. So while he doesn't have the melee capability, pros and cons with that respect. So is it worth it? Not really, from my point of view. You can certainly steamroll Forgrim. Oh, great. That's such a wonderful thing, defeating a Legendary Lord early on. I could play Daniel and defeat Forgrim early on. That's not really a benefit from my perspective. I wish this campaign was better, but yeah, right now, number 3 spot. And it should be mentioned that between Warzak, Skarsnik, and Azag, they were like 5, 6, 7% in the poll, and that can change a bit. So who knows? Maybe in a day or two, he'll actually be in last position, as he deserves. Regardless, moving on to the really good campaigns of the Greenskins. At number 2, according to your votes, it is Grom the Paunch. Now, Grom the Paunch starts with the tier 1 settlement in a province with a single settlement. That is not really great, honestly. But although Greenskins have amazing growth, so in the long term, it doesn't matter. The other downside in this campaign is that he's surrounded by a pleasant climate, which doesn't matter as much for Greenskins because they do have cheap buildings early on, and they do have a lot of money, especially Grom, who can literally print said money. Like, seriously, yeah, you got the ability of getting money over here very, very quickly through his freaking cauldron. Because, like, you get ocean clams if you sack a Bretonnian settlement, which gives you a random amount of money and gives you 10% casualty replenishment. You also start with the casualty replenishment hero as well as trolls. He is really the Goblin Tide. Everything that Skarsnik should be, in a lot of ways, Grom is. He's got really good goblins. Like goblins with explosive arrows. Goblins with enormous melee and range benefits through this freaking cauldron. He personally is pretty solid in battle with that freaking cauldron. He has a benefit for chariots and a physical resistance benefit for goblins. And he actually has the Goblin Tide. Yes, he's much better at leading goblins than Skarsnik is, because 10% physical resistance as well as Goblin Tide, that is pretty damn a lot, really. And then leadership when fighting against elves, which is another significant benefit. You gotta love this campaign. I think, like, in terms of short campaign, this is one of the best campaigns in the game. The problem is, because of the climate situation, this campaign falls off. That said, it is certainly a lot of fun putting yourself against the entire freaking world of the Empire Bretonnia with elves and whatever dwarven faction meets your way. And yeah, just fighting Alfarian, Tyrion, and Alariel over here. Actually fighting everyone, because you can. Like, this is a campaign that really, really can deliver. You can rush Wolf 1, you can spend some time in Bretonnia trying to make it work, and then go for Wolf 1. It can be a lot of fun regardless. So, great campaign from a short-term perspective. The climate situation does limit its long-term potential, but you know what? Most people most people don't play long campaigns. Like, the vast majority of the player base, over 95% of the player base, hasn't even finished a single campaign. Or 90% plus hasn't finished a single campaign. So maybe that's an explanation for it. Like, if you're looking for a short campaign, this is it. Really does deliver. Because all those benefits, those faction benefits that Grom gets for that freaking cauldron is insane. Plus 8 control, so you'll never face rebellions. Global recruitment benefits. Income from old buildings. Faction-wide. It is freaking absurd. But even more, global recruitment duration -1 turn for goblin units. So nasty skulkers, goblin archers, virtually every goblin unit in the game, 1 turn global recruitment. It's ludicrous what Grom can do. Maybe this is a campaign where you can even go more extreme, where you load, where you save characters from with Grimgor, with Tamarcon straight, load them up over here, especially if they have Mushroom Addicted, and get that global recruitment capacity and then steamroll in a way that very few other people can't. But yeah, great campaign in a lot of ways. Just, I wish the climate situation was better, though there are mods for that as well. And finally, and number 1 for the Greenskins is, of course, Grimgor, the unstoppable killing machine. Quite literally unstoppable, especially if you get Tamarcon's defeat rate, which you can naturally get in this campaign pretty damn early. Now sure, other campaigns you can use the load save character system, and I certainly did use it here, but if you're playing Grimgor's campaign normally, you can still get it, and then things get interesting, because Grimgor has one particular faction effect that makes him that much more powerful with Tamarcon around. He can get Black Orc big bosses in every single province. He starts with 1. So you combine that with Tamarcon's defeat rate, he is nigh on freaking unstoppable. Like, Grimgor's campaign right now, if you start the campaign with the load save character system, is Grimgor and the boys. Unstoppable. Like, I have got 15 hero capacity. And by the way, fun fact, if you load a character that already has Tamarcon's defeat rate, you can then remove that character and still keep the hero capacity. Like, yeah, some of these guys do have it, but not all of them. That's not justifying the 15 hero capacity that I have there. And it's not just that, you can also get goblin big bosses, insane levels of goblin big bosses. Yeah, it is only Skarsnik that gets them at, increases their capacity at tier 3. Small advantage for the weakest runt of the goblins. Like, you know, people talk about like how Skarsnik can have an army tide. Grimgor is the hero tide of the Greenskins. And on top of that, he can also get Zarnagrun the earliest out of a lot of campaigns. Like, you can do it in Kolek's campaign, though it doesn't have the same kind of benefits. You can do it in, you know, Tamarcon's campaign if you really want to push it ahead for it, but it's like none can get the light quite as quickly and quite as easily as Grimgor, because like, I've got 3 freaking stacks over here, 4 freaking stacks. Gorf the Cruel is going to have a really, really bad day. You declare a war against Astrograph, wipe the freaking floor with him to get his defeat, to build up that war force, and then you're not attacking Zarnagrun to 4 stacks, you're attacking it with 8 stacks in 15, 20 turns at most. And one peculiarity of the Greenskins is when they loot and occupy settlements, or just occupy them in general, they can take them at the same tier they're at. So you can get Zarnagrund as a tier 5 settlement. That is a biblical level of power. I've said this before, I'll say it again. Grimgor was buffed with the launch of Immortal Empires because his starting position made his campaign a cakewalk. He was buffed with the release of the Chaos Dwarves because Zarnagrund is free real estate. He got buffed with Tamarcon's addition because that defeat rate Tamarcon has is quite very powerful. Also, one of the problems you would face in a Grimgor campaign potentially was that you would have to deal with Kolek. But now Tamarcon does deal with Kolek, and you can ally Tamarcon, so even more absurdity. Oh, Zaytan is going to be a problem? Sick the Maga Lord on him. Just have him deal with all that. Grimgor is the one faction that, typically speaking, gets to faction strength rank 1 under AI control. If you're playing on Legendary, there is a discrepancy between difficulty settings, of course, with respect to all of this, but yeah, Grimgor is freaking Grimgor. And I'll say this much. Grimgor may end up fighting Tamarcon in his campaign when under AI control, but imagine if he wins that fight. Imagine if he under AI control, he gets a bunch of those defeat traits on various lords, and you don't deal with him within like 30 turns or so. Like, let's say you're dealing with him at turn 60. He will have not all just this territory, but he'll have everything the mountains more. I've seen him numerous times. If he wins this fight against Kolak Tarmukan, he's nigh on freaking unstoppable as a campaign. A force of nature with no mercy whatsoever. He's hard to deal with, and in point of fact, when you fight him, when anyone fights Grimgor, or when you control him, you can't defeat him straight up. Like, seriously, like, if you try and kill Grimgor in a 1v1 situation, you're probably gonna lose the battle. The best thing you can do is try and lure him away from the battle, and so he runs around trying to chase people down, because he is so durable. He doesn't have regeneration, but Jesus, what he has is insane. Ward save, armor, high levels of durability, very difficult to surround, wound recovery time, melee defense, best of the best for melee defense and damage resistance, frenzy, terror, leadership for Black Orcs, armor piercing damage. Yeah, you don't want to freaking fight Grimgor. He's insane. Simply insane. And your next, so try duel Grimgor. He will win with your next ability. So that is what you're playing. Grimgor isn't a campaign as much as he is an endgame crisis that's under your control from turn 1. Dwarves can trigger early game, end game crisis and confederate them. Grimgor is an endgame crisis. And I think like Creative Assembly should take notes on what they're going to do with Nagash, because this is how Nagash should feel like at one point. Christine signing out.